Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the penultimate episode of An Evening with the Women of Formula One. It is great to see so many of you joining us this evening for this wonderful event, a very special event organised by F1, FIA Girls on Track UK and managed by Motorsport UK. My name is Rosanna Tennant and I work for Formula One, presenting a lot of their coverage, both in the digital world and at the track as well during the events. And today we've got two fabulous guests to talk to, so thank you so much for registering. I'm sure you're all very keen to hear from our two guests, Targett-Adams and Emily Prazer. Now, I'm sure you've seen already what they do because you've registered for the event. Chloe is the Director of Race Promotions and Emily is Head of Commercial Development Race Promotion. So we will get to them very, very shortly, but let's just quickly go through a few housekeeping rules. We are recording, which is great because I love a bit of film and TV, but if you feel like you'd like to just head off, spend the evening doing something else in lockdown, if you're in the UK, then please feel free to do that and you can catch up with what we get up to this evening a little later on. All the videos that have taken place over the course of February will be on FIA Girls on Track UK's social media, so keep an eye out for all of those over the coming weeks. And I can't believe we are into the final week of these webinars. What a way to spend February and to pass the time in lockdown, as I say, but if you're joining us from around the world, welcome as well. Now, if you've joined us over the course of the last few weeks, you'll know that F1 and FIA Girls on Track UK has a mission to inspire and, of course, to improve their inclusion and diversity across the sport and in the motorsport world more generally. And so Girls on Track UK thought it would be fabulous to partner with F1 and to spotlight and champion some of the fantastic women that work in the industry and the sport. And as I've already mentioned tonight, those two fantastic women are Chloe Targett-Adams and Emily Prazer. This evening, you're all wonderfully seated in our webinar, but we would love you to stay on mute. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to unmute yourselves. That just makes sure that we can hear what Chloe and Emily have to say this evening. But if you want to get in touch and send in a question, please do use the chat function, use everyone so we can see your questions, and we will do our very best to get through as many of them as possible in the coming hour. And I know lots of you over the last few weeks have wanted to ask questions to our fabulous women, so please feel free to fire as many questions into our everyone chat function as you wish. Right, well, you know who I am, you know why we're doing this. Let's get to our two fabulous guest speakers this evening. Chloe, I will come to you first. Now, Director of Race Promotions, good evening to you. What do you do at Formula One? Because it sounds like a fantastic title, but I want to know what happens day to day in your offices or perhaps in your living room these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good point, Rosanna. These days, the Formula One race promotion business is pretty much run out of bedrooms or living rooms until we get back to the office. So race promotion, in simple terms, is selling the rights to global promoters to hold races or host races in their countries. It's also about working with our race promoters to commercialize those events and also on the venue operations side to deliver those events. So it's a combination of business development, of event delivery and commercialization through things like hospitality, partnerships, and pretty much any other different ways that we can think around marketing, promoting and helping our promoters to commercialize their events. And Emily's really the expert on that, so she can talk much more around that.
Well, that sounds fantastic. We've got lots of people messaging saying hello from all around the world. And I can imagine you are in touch with people all around the world as well, Chloe. And I can imagine we will get onto that a little later on. And you've already mentioned Emily. Emily, so lovely to actually properly meet you because we haven't really worked together on the ground. So how do you do, first of all?
Nice
but also, I would love to hear a little bit more about what you do as Head of Commercial Development Race Promotions and how you therefore kind of work with Chloe as well.
Sure. So I guess I support Chloe on the more general conversations with promoters on new race locations, evaluating that pipeline and then working through the complexity of bringing a race to a new country. And then with our promoters on a day-to-day basis, like Chloe mentioned, on the commercial side, ensuring that we maximise all opportunities during and after the event and making sure that we use the F1 IP in each territory all year round. So that could be through local sponsorship or bringing new activations to the races, or coming up with some wacky ideas that we've never done before, which we can talk about more throughout the call if it's of interest. But generally, it's definitely a really broad role, making sure that we can bring all the new cool F1 initiatives to each promoter and localize that so it's relevant to everyone.
I mean, I think,
I'm looking forward
sorry,
to
Rosanna, I was going to say, I think, Emily, a really interesting example to talk about perhaps is a collaboration with Bond in Motion that we rolled out at, or you rolled out at, with the team at I think around 10 events back in 2019.
So pre-COVID, when people could go to races and we had lots of fans there, we partnered with Bond in Motion, which was a permanent exhibition in central London with a display of James Bond cars. So we worked with 8 of our European race promoters to bring that exhibition to those Grand Prix. And it was a free experience for all of our guests at those races to really work, be able to walk around, see them all, and then got the likes of Aston Martin, Red Bull Racing involved, and we did some really cool pieces to camera and some promotional activity around it. So that was a really fun one. We're working with Silverstone on glamping, which is really cool. We started that in 2019, developed food festival concepts with Abu Dhabi. So again, it really depends on the markets that we're in, but we're trying to come up with all of these new ways of engaging our fans whilst we're at their tracks.
Well, I can definitely vouch for the Bond in Motion, because I remember posing like James Bond next to the wonderful installation you guys had. I have to say, of course, 2020 was a season like no other, and essentially you might as well have just taken a match to the calendar, ripped up the pieces of paper, all the plans and the diarising. So where did you begin, and what was 2020 like for you as a team? Was it almost having to start from scratch again? And I'm not really sure whether that's a Chloe or an Emily kind of question, so you guys divvy it up as you feel appropriate.
I'll throw that one to you both.
Okay, so Emily, I'll start and then feel free to add. So, I mean, to really start at the beginning of the story, we knew there was this virus coming because we have a race in Shanghai. And so we started working with our Shanghai race promoter, who are partners with the Shanghai government, around late January 2020 to try and reschedule their event. And at that time, obviously, that was a combination then of talking with other promoters, because working on or building the F1 calendar, which is part of our job as the race promotion team, is normally a kind of 18-month process. And so trying to find space with all the different factors you have to work through to schedule a major event, from working within that location with stakeholders to liaising with the teams and the FIA to the logistics factors and weather factors, means that it's not straightforward. So then it was like a domino effect, and we effectively did, following the cancellation of our Australian race, regroup back at base and work on various different calendar scenarios, to the point where we eventually were able to come up with sections of the calendar that we announced in phases as the virus progressed, so we would know that we could definitely achieve those and race. So it was ultimately a lot of work. It was really exciting. We brought on, I think, 5 new races to the calendar. We did 17 races in total, I think, in 14 countries, and it was just ongoing. I mean, as part of which we had to develop how do we put in place COVID protocols, how do we develop a testing regime that doesn't take away anything from public sector, from the incredible work that public health are doing both in the UK and in all the locations we're visiting. How do we make sure that our personnel and the team's personnel are traveling safely? So it was an incredible amount of work. So effectively, COVID did put a match to the calendar, Rosanna, and we did, like in everything in Formula One, you just roll your sleeves up, you think, right, this is a problem to solve. I call it the eternal Rubik's Cube. How do we do it? And, Emily, you were a key part of that process as well. So perhaps you'd like to, talk more about how we brought on those new races at really short notice.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key point for me, that I'd like to make is mostly just around the team effort. in terms of Formula One, and how obviously led by Chloe, we were able to do that. I don't think it's something that anyone thought was feasible or possible. And I think typically a new race still takes between, Chloe, 2 and 3 years to really do. And the fact we were doing these in the 5 in a year is unbelievable. But the fact from like the start of a conversation through to a contract being signed was on average about 6 weeks. Like credit to our kind of, like I say, Chloe leading it, our legal team, the sporting operations team, the FIA, like everybody had to completely graft to be able to make that happen for the fans. And I think obviously it would never have happened without the culture and the spirit and the teamwork that comes with it. COVID hasn't had an impact on everybody working from home, being away from friends and family, and the fun part of our job of traveling the world, and having almost, in my career anyway, the first time I've ever had a desk-based job in 10 years, and having to kind of deal with that side of things. So I think obviously having such a good product really helps. Obviously we can't get away from the fact that when you're talking to new countries, that you can still display quite a bit of value through the TV product, and having to change almost how we position ourselves from this incredible fan event to what we can deliver to these countries through media value and through other types of impact was really important. But the way that we reacted, I think, and from a senior leadership point of view, was just incredible. They had complete belief in us from the offset that we'd be able to do it. And even when we were doubting, the crisis going on in the world, it was still like, no, we're going to announce this calendar. And yeah, it was pretty spectacular to be part of, really.
Well, I think I speak on behalf of everybody watching this evening to say thank you so much, because we did have the most fantastic year of racing. So that's the sort of here and now, and we'll talk a bit about what your team looks like a little later on in the chat. But I'd like to go back to almost the beginning of your journeys, both of you. And we've had a wonderful question in from lots of people. Thank you so much for asking all these lovely questions. Sarah has asked, she's from Newcastle, so she's saying hello from Newcastle. She says, a question for both of you. What was your journey to the current roles you're in? Did you go to uni? And do you have any tips for gaining work experience in marketing and promoting, and what people could be doing? So maybe Chloe would come to you first.
Yeah, so I did go to university. I went to Leeds, which I enjoyed thoroughly, and I studied English literature and history. And then I went and did a law conversion course, and I became a lawyer, working in the City of London first on very corporate finance related deals and M&A and transactions, and also film financing and film production. And then I joined Formula One as our kind of sole corporate counsel in 2009 in what was obviously a very small team and very small office, when the company was led and owned by CVC, our previous shareholders, and run by Bernie Ecclestone. And then through my kind of, I guess, 7 or 8 years at Formula One before Liberty, our current shareholders, bought us, I worked on all different aspects of the business, because we were a very small team and there wasn't the kind of corporate structures that were in place. It was a great opportunity to learn different things, and then was able to transition over to a more commercial role. And so heading up the race promotion division of our commercial operations function, essentially. And so that was my journey, which is probably different. It's obviously, I can't answer directly that kind of marketing and promotion experience per se, other than obviously there were various things I did at university around that, and kind of work experience before. But Emily, you might be better placed to answer more directly around that.
I'll pick you up, Chloe, just quickly on that first. People might be listening and thinking, cripes, I don't have a law degree, I haven't worked in corporate finance, I haven't worked in the film industry, how can I aspire to do what Chloe does? Do you use your legal knowledge and your expertise on a day-to-day basis? Does it help? Could people who maybe are thinking about which university degree to do, could law be something that would be useful to put into their armory? I
think that there is some, law is a professional skill that you learn. And so equally it can provide, similar to if you study accountancy or a business degree, it provides useful business skills that you can then transfer. And obviously a lot of people that I learned and trained with and practice with as a lawyer when I was starting out, still work in the legal profession and hugely enjoy that job. There are obviously, because I trained as a lawyer, there are elements of that I use day to day, but more in terms of process, in terms of, I guess, the kind of research, logic, ability to form an argument. A good part of my work is negotiation. Obviously, it's like a lot of roles on a commercial side, they're all ultimately, when you're dealing with revenue, it's all based around contracts, because that's where the revenue gets locked into. So there's an element of it that is I still use because it's training I had, but it's obviously, there is, I think the one thing probably for everyone to remember is there's no right or wrong approach. It's about what you're interested in, and B, unless you want to be as very specific kind of profession that you really need to have that training, so a doctor, or you continue to be a lawyer, equally those can also provide the foundations to change career. So I think if anyone going into this should really keep open-minded, there's no necessarily set path, but if you think of these more building blocks and foundations for how you might want to grow your experience and grow your career. And that was just my experience of it. And I knew quite early on that for me, a longer term career in law wasn't something that was of interest, but they were providing me with very valuable business skills that I was able to learn from that experience to then try and find out longer term what direction I was, trying to go into. And I think none of us ever really know where that is either. We're all still learning.
Exactly. No, but it's good to know that those sort of transferable skills and qualifications are valuable across different industries, and particularly the Formula One world. Emily, when I was looking up what degrees to go into, I'm pretty sure there wasn't a degree that led to head of commercial development race promotion at F1. So what did you study?
So I study sport, physical education and coaching science, which probably is all quite ironic, but I just wanted to be a PE teacher because I didn't have to wear smart clothes every day, which obviously is like the complete reverse effect of where we've ended up. But what actually happened is, throughout my degree, I was very much drawn to the business side of sport, which was a module. And I don't know if anyone is my age on here, but there was a program on Sky One at the time called Dream Team FC, which is about running a football club. And I just was completely obsessed with the fact that that's what I wanted to do. So I decided that from quite a young age, that I really wanted to get involved in sport. Obviously, you're very weird noise in my house.
Don't worry. Where did you do? We won't talk about how your voice was sounding before we went live this evening. Where did you do your degree?
So I did it at Birmingham University. So yeah, it was great. I have to admit, I was never a massive academic. I was much more practical. And I think that's where, you kind of figure it out as you go along. I was quite fortunate that when I came out of university, I got a job. I decided I wanted to try recruitment because that's what all my friends were doing at the time. So I did that and very quickly realized that, again, being in a bit of a boiler room wasn't something that I wanted to do. And then it was just kind of very good timing and luck that I managed to get a job at IMG as part of their kind of hospitality sales function. I stayed. Timing is, you can never know what these people are looking for. So it's being in the right place at the right time, I think. And
but was that sending an email? Was that keeping across a jobs board at various agencies, and IMG was one of them? Or how did you actually kind of stumble across the opportunity?
I think, when you want to work in sport, there's a couple of sports agencies that you always, personally signed up to a lot of those job boards. So I was always monitoring what was happening at specific companies, one of which being IMG. I think the other was CSM, CAA. There are a handful of rather large agencies that you typically follow when you're looking to get into sport and more of an entry-level role. So I just made sure that I was kind of monitoring that all the time. And it was one of those, kind of went through a pretty stressful, I remember it being a pretty stressful recruitment period where I had to pitch buying some debenture tickets at Club Wembley, and like the first interview was on the halfway line, and you're like, oh my god, this is bad. But you got through it eventually, and I think it just kind of went from there, where you just keep seeing those opportunities to grow. And how I ended up at F1 was a LinkedIn post, really. I was working for Fast and Furious, which was a NBC Universal project, developing their live show, and I think it was quite a niche position, because my role was head of commercial partnerships and sponsorship, which is very much driving the commercial revenue side and the sponsorship side. But we were partnered with Live Nation, who are a massive event kind of promoter. So as part of my role, I was managing 40 promoters, which is quite niche. Like, not many people would have had that opportunity. So when I clearly sent my CV to Chloe, it was ticking a couple of boxes on the
yeah. I mean, I think to add to that, and probably to explain a bit more, you know, race promotion is something that sounds really unique, but effectively it is just, you know, live event rights, and how that is and how it's very similar to the music business in terms of live touring shows, or Disney with live touring shows and working with promoters, or equally other major kind of sports series like WWE, and so really it's around, if you're interested in live events and how they work, and the commercial relationships and commercial structures behind live events, this is where the F1 function of race promotion comes into it. And that's why when we look to recruit, looking for those transferable skills is really key, because as Emily said, it's not necessarily as so obvious that someone has worked in race promotion before, and that's not what we're looking for, because equally, as much as that's very helpful, it's not the be all and end all. So I think in terms of thinking about your, you know, what work experience you might do, or what degree you might study, or even in higher education, what you might go on to, or your initial jobs, it's thinking about how those transferable skills can maybe set you up for that further career opportunity, and keeping open-minded to it.
Definitely, yeah, being open-minded and not sort of closing any doors. A lot of people are asking questions about the internship program, the F1 internship program, and I'm going to just choose one at random. Yes, Amy has asked, will the race promotion team be involved in the new F1 internship program? How are you guys working on that?
Well, I think we've got a great example. So Emily, given it was something that you ran and led, I think you're better placed to answer this.
Yeah, so we actually were the first, I think we were one of the first or second teams to actually get involved in that. So we had an intern kind of last year who came in, and I felt quite, you know, sorry for, in the sense of she started at the beginning of COVID, and so she didn't get the maximum opportunity, but it was incredible for her. We worked really closely with her, and she's now actually gone on to work for W Series off the basis of the work experience she got with us. So she was really fortunate, and I'm sure we'll explain in a bit how the team is divided into kind of commercial and relationship side. But this particular girl managed to kind of balance her time between the two teams. So she got both the commercial exposure, working with me on some of our projects, like the Bond in Motion stuff that we mentioned, but which would have been happening last year and unfortunately didn't for other reasons. She also helped us create some really strong decks and proposals that we were working on, and then on the relationship side, she got heavily involved in some of our races, Spain, I believe, and Zandvoort. So she really got that experience on all sides, and it's just unfortunate that she never got to come to a race. But now that she's with the W Series, we hope to see her. I think they're coming to 8 of our races this year, so she'll be up to speed quite quickly.
So what are you looking for when you're taking someone in for the internship program, and also then when you're actually looking to bring someone into the team full time? What are those sort of desirable attributes? And that's a question I've had in from Amy on the chat function. Do keep your questions coming in.
Go on, Chloe.
Yeah. Race promotion is really fast paced. It's 24/7. And so if you are interested in coming to work in race promotion or live events, you need to be willing and want to work weekends, work evenings. We work with really privileged. We get to work with so many different countries and cultures around the world, which is just unbelievable. But it does mean you're having to organize how to do meetings with people in Australia, China, US. So their day ends, you're still going. So I think what we're looking for is someone that really has that can-do attitude, that are prepared to kind of roll their sleeves up. We were a very small team, all hands to deck. We're all here to kind of achieve the bigger purpose, which obviously in F1 world is to unleash the greatest racing spectacle in the planet. And we continue with that mission and we enjoy doing it. So that really is, the number one key attribute that we're looking for. Emily, feel free to jump in.
I think for me,
sense of humour is always good.
Yeah, sense of humour is always good. You spend a lot of time on aeroplanes together. So
non-COVID world.
Yeah, in the non-COVID world. But for me, it's people that have an open mind. You're dealing with, to Chloe's point, with so many different cultures that you need to be able to switch on and off to different ways of working. Be respectful, and I think that you have to take that into consideration. Not that any people aren't as fortunate to have that global exposure, so it's being quite open from the offset to be able to adapt to those different kind of governments and policies and regulations that are really important to the core of the business, which is racing. So yeah, that's the big one for me.
Obviously, you deal with a lot of people internationally. I'm so sorry. Every time I speak, it sounds like there's an Alsatian barking around me, but there's not. I live alone and have no pets. But we've had a couple of questions in. One from Nancy asking, is it possible to apply for the internship or permanent job, even though she's from Latin America? But I'm sure there are a lot of people around the world that would like to work for the F1 race promotions team. But I can imagine, because you're liaising with a lot of the sort of corresponding race promotion teams around the world at different tracks, in different countries, there are opportunities everywhere. How does F1 work with international applicants, and what could you maybe suggest in terms of getting involved with race promotion around the world?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Rosanna. In terms of F1, we're obviously a UK-based organisation. So in terms of anyone applying for a job with us that is outside of the UK, there's obviously various recruitment and HR policies and processes we need to go through as to whether it's possible for that person to be able to move to the UK for work. And we would go through that as part of the recruitment process. So if it's not, or if equally someone is not based in the UK and does not want to be based in the UK, we have 23 races around the world. Our race promoters are always looking to build their team, so if there's any races in your countries, equally there are a myriad of broadcasters around the world working on Formula One, and equally our global partners and sponsors and some of their sponsorship teams on F1 and likewise with the team. So Formula One is a global sport, and I think there are probably those opportunities. I think the big thing that we've got to do as Formula One is really make sure those opportunities are getting out to the widest possible people to attract the most diverse working culture and personnel that we can attract, because that will only help us grow F1.
Definitely. A very interesting question has come in from Aoife saying, there's a business of motorsport master's degree in the UK. Do you think that having that degree is an advantage? I definitely didn't see that on the list when I was applying for university 100 years ago, but would it be something that you would look at fondly if you saw it on a CV that came across your desk?
I mean, I think from my perspective, it is really good, but I think it's, if you're making the decision that you only want to work in motorsport, I guess there's a danger in that regard of looking at it from quite a one-dimensional point of view. Mm-hmm. I think particularly in our team, we like to see things from an event in its entirety point of view, as opposed to just the motorsport side. But I think it really depends on that person's personal passion. You know, some people join Formula One or a team or a promoter and they want to be there for the entirety of their career. I think there could be a slight, you know, you could end up being kind of stuck there if that's the type of path you go down. But equally, if that's your passion and what you want to do, then I think you should absolutely follow it. I don't know whether I would look at it any more or less favorably. I would just imagine that person really, really wants to work in this industry. And so therefore you'd want to give them a go and see what they could bring to the team. But I wouldn't look at someone without that degree any less favorably. I think it really depends on the person that you're talking to and their personal motivations.
So with that in mind then, do you have to be an F1 nut to work in the F1 race promotions team? And I mean that in the nicest way possible, because I think I'm probably with a lot of nuts right now who do love Formula One. And of course, that's why they've shown an interest in the webinar this evening. But if you don't know all about the track or the, you know, how the track's laid out or who won there in 1985, does it matter? Does it matter?
Well, I'm going to jump in and answer this because honestly, no one can know less than I did when I joined Formula One. Seriously. So I've had a really interesting career for the last 12 years at Formula One, and part of that is because I have so much to learn. I have the advantage that my husband is an absolute F1 super fan. I think some of my colleagues call him super fan. So anything I need explaining or don't understand about racing and teams, I can count on him, which is great. So no, in the short answer, you don't need to be an F1 fan. If you are, I love it because I don't have that knowledge. But equally, it's something that, you know, I have become an F1 fan because it's just such an incredible sport and an amazing, interesting business to be part of. But it is, yeah, for me, it was all completely new. Emily, I think you probably knew a bit more about Formula One than I did, which is an understatement.
Yeah, no, I definitely followed it, and I think grew up watching it on Sundays with, you know, family at home, so always understood it. But I think the business side of it is just another level. Like, being a part of that is something that I'm like hugely proud of. But as an actual sport, I think it's really important to follow it, because obviously you want to be able to phone your promoter who's just held a race and it's like the most proud moment of their year and talk about it the day after. So I don't think you need to know all the technicalities of engine regulations or track layouts. I think in our particular area, track layouts are something that I've certainly started taking much more of an interest in, especially when we're looking at new street race locations and things like that. It's like interesting to be able to understand what the technical guys are saying on a conference call rather than literally not having a clue. But again, all of that comes quite naturally. The more you listen, the more you learn. So, and again, kind of going back to the culture of F1, there doesn't seem to be a restriction on that ability to keep learning and like be invited to calls that have, you know, very little to do with your specialism, but equally as important for you to hear and develop that knowledge. So yeah, I don't think that you have to be a super fan for sure.
Still so many wonderful questions coming in. Freya has asked a good question, because with other webinars, I hosted some where perhaps it's much easier to gain experience. You could go and work in a newsroom, you could write a blog, you could be quite active if it's more the sort of digital media side of things. With race promotion, if you are sort of 15, 16, late teenager years, thinking about getting to uni, it's tricky to engineer a scenario where you can find experience in race promotions, especially at the moment, of course, with COVID. So what would you both suggest people could do that might just make that difference when they're writing it on their CV at the moment, especially as we're all locked inside?
I would think about, you know, the rate. Ultimately, a Formula One race is an event just on a super size scale. So what kind of event experience, you know, the world is opening up, can you gain? And that can be from, you know, putting on a club night or something at uni, to putting on a production, to you know, being involved in a sports event, to applying for work experience at, you know, any other kind of event or sports organization. You know, can you go and help your local kind of club or team on a match day? They don't have to be a kind of Premier League club. You're still going to get experience and knowledge of, you know, fan attending an event, and how the team manage with that. So that would be my suggestion.
Good idea. And Emily, what about you? Have you got any kind of little pearls of wisdom on that?
I think in a kind of lockdown COVID world, I would say that there's quite a bit of information around kind of the reason that these big countries and governments pay to host races. So if I was kind of starting from scratch and I couldn't go to a live event, I think I spent some time kind of trawling the internet around those economic impact studies, the kind of objectives and goals for countries in the future, and the reason why they might be looking to host major events. And I don't think that's strictly limited to Formula One, but there is a reason why countries bid for World Cups and Olympics and all of those types of things, which is quite important when we're talking to new countries, like I said earlier. And then obviously, that's kind of the foundation of how do we build that around the different kind of opportunities within that. But as a basis, it's like what goes into that. It's around kind of spend on site, the media value of that, the TV audience, and just starting to get to grips with all of those different inputs that kind of show the value to a country around a major sport. But like I said, I don't think it's limited only to F1.
Well, I was going to start organising those friends at the bottom of my CV and see if that came up, but obviously not relevant. So I think we mentioned it a little bit at the beginning about obviously your two lovely ladies working in Formula One in a certain department. What does the race promotions department look like in terms of male, female, age? Is it too late to join if somebody's 45 and thinking of a career switch, or seeing you guys talking and they're actually a boy? Are they thinking, well, I can't apply? Like, who's welcome in the race promotions team?
Everyone. Ooh, I mean, there's no, seriously, I mean, it's been a great opportunity because we had the opportunity to effectively build the team from scratch, because it didn't exist in the previous kind of under the previous leadership under Bernie. So the race promotion team has been formed since 2017. We obviously are, an equal opportunity employer. We would encourage anyone from any background, any diversity, any age, gender to apply for sure. And it has worked out that we're a team of 5. We are predominantly female. We have had a high majority of female candidates applying, and those turned out to be, strongest skill set. That said, we have got, we've got a wonderful male colleague in the team who is so far the only guy, but I'm sure that will change. And the rest of Formula One can be quite male dominated at times, so I don't think there's any issue with that. And we're just looking for as diverse team as possible, because obviously that creates good collaboration. It fosters different opinions, which I think is very important in terms of when you're wanting to be creative and wanting to grow and also engage with numerous cultures around the world. So that's the current makeup and structure.
And I'm interested to know, obviously in the normal world, there's a lot of travel. If somebody has a family, how does that work? Is there the option to sort of choose which races you go to, or which race promoters you're allocated, or can you take a weekend off? How strict is it?
Yeah, no, of course. I think work-life balance is incredibly important, because otherwise you lead to burnout, and then you're never going to achieve your objectives and goals, whether that's for the business strategic objectives that we're trying to fulfill, or your personal ones in terms of where that your career development and your remuneration plans. So it's really important to be able to have that space. So in terms of the team, obviously we have people who work on different race accounts, and so you would travel to the races that you're working on, or if there's a particular business need. There's obviously travel in a non-COVID year, or non-race travel, I mean, for where there's kind of business reason to do that. But a lot of meetings are conducted by phone, by virtually, and it's trying to really find the best solution so that it works for the team as a whole to meet our objectives, but also it doesn't work for anyone to be constantly on a plane flying here, there, everywhere, because it's just impossible to manage the workload. And you know, I've had that experience, and it's just not conducive to being able to deliver what you need to deliver in your role for the business. So
to function as a human being as well.
Yeah, exactly. So travel is part of working in Formula One, not in every role in Formula One for sure. There are tons of roles which are non-travel based and completely UK based. So I think in terms of working out what interests you and what role you would like to pursue, it's something to definitely consider. But I would say it's it's very few roles that have to travel the entire time.
You mentioned other departments do and don't travel, but in terms of how you work with other departments across Formula One, I imagine legal is a department you're knocking on the door of fairly often. Are there other departments that you lean on for support when getting kind of discussions through the contract phase and then through to kind of rubber stamping a race? And that's a lot of questions. We've had a lot of questions on that. So everybody has asked that. I'll just summarize it. Lots of different people asking that sort of question.
Yeah, I mean, I think we literally work with every department within F1, which is one of the really unique positions of being in this team and why it gives you so much opportunity to learn the business. So I think on a daily basis, I speak with, at least 6 other departments around different initiatives or trying to push contracts through, like you say. I do think through COVID, it's definitely been the legal team mostly, but in a normal year, I would say, hospitality, sponsorship, marketing, our Big and Hill operation, who are obviously the media and technology side, and our team that work under Ross on the motorsport side are pretty fundamental in terms of who we're talking to on a day-to-day basis. But to be honest, I literally can't think of one team that we don't interact with within the business.
I'll give that question to Amber. That was more from Amber. I was just checking my notes. And let's just kind of go through the process, because I think people are interested to know how it works. Do you get the likes of Saudi Arabia picking up the phone and asking, hey, we'd like to have a race? Or is it you phoning up Vietnam and saying, hey, we'd like to come and race with you? How does that work? And where are those initial discussions taking place?
It's a really good question. We're really fortunate in Formula One, and even actually more so in a post-COVID world, it's really reignited interest in Formula One from multiple territories. So it's a combination of the two. We have approaches from cities, from governments about hosting a race in their location. We have limited space to bring on races. And so part of our role is evaluating that. We obviously work with our CEO, Stefano, now on those opportunities. And then there are other locations that we see as key strategic locations as to where we will be proactively reaching out via a kind of network that we have, or putting together and looking to build that network and relationships in order to ultimately see if we can deliver a new race in that location. And we also have the amazing upside of working with so many experienced and great promoters already. And so part of the dynamic of building our race calendar is also about renewing with our existing promoters and looking at where we race. If you think about some of our locations like the UK, Silverstone, Monaco, that they're just core parts of Formula One calendar. And then we've been racing there for, so many years. Then part of the excitement is the legacy of those races and the history.
Absolutely. I think what we all love to see, some of those racetracks, well, Formula One just wouldn't be the same without them. On the same sort of topic, Megan has asked a question. And I guess the reason it's the same sort of topic is we spoke a bit about how quickly you were having to turn around contracts last year. And Megan's asked, what's your greatest or proudest activity or event that you've worked on besides the 2020 season? So I guess fast tracking contracts would be probably a proud achievement from last year. But you've mentioned the Bond exhibitions. What else has been something that if you were looking for another job, what would you be telling them you'd done at Formula One?
Wow, that is such a good question.
I'm not trying to do. There's so many.
Yeah.
And also probably things that people don't realise are small little projects within a race weekend, if you know what I mean. You kind of think, if you're going as a fan, I'm always taken aback at how amazing the event is. But then you break it down, you think that doesn't all it's just not one event. There are like multiple events almost going on within one race weekend. So again, it's even more to choose from for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think as alongside some of the things that, I mean, and I'm just picking most recent things, it's one, that's a brilliant question. It's really hard, and it shows actually what an incredible place to work is, that we're both struggling with that, not because there aren't examples, but because I think but I will talk for both of us here, that there are too many. So alongside COVID last year, I think it was, for me, kind of, oh, Emily's cat's here, great, this is like, you know, normal working environment, was, you know, launching and finalizing our new race in Saudi Arabia, which is incredibly interesting, exciting market when you look at the demographic of Saudi and our reach in the Middle East and what that can lead to longer term. And along at the same time, we also, you know, closed and resurrected Formula One in Sao Paulo for the longer term, which was a completely, you know, new promoter there, which was a project that Emily and I had been working on for about a year or longer. And so those are two highlights, alongside making sure that we could race last year, which really was kind of the highlight of my career at Formula One to date. As well as building, actually, I will just add to that, is building a race promotion team, because what we're achieving today from where the business was a couple of years ago is just phenomenally exciting. And the ability to keep doing that day in, day out is one of, I think, the achievements that I'm most proud of. But, you know, there's still so much work to do every day.
What about you, Emily? Anything standing out for you?
Yeah, I think my one is kind of on a smaller scale, but one of the things that we try to do is take these new initiatives to promoters. And obviously in 2017, our digital team launched esports, and that's something that we have really encouraged our promoters to use it, like I said earlier, as a way to engage our fans all year round and not just the weekend of the race. And I think the highlight for me on that side of things is that recently our Chinese promoter hosted the grand final, the regional kind of Chinese grand final, I think it's called that. And I think over the course of the series, they had something like 53 million views. Whoa. And I just feel like incredibly proud that we really pushed them to take on that challenge, and that, you know, they're delivering new fans for us in a market that's incredibly important for the sport on a, you know, year-round basis. So I think that's probably one of my favorites.
So then we have to talk about the future, and Lorena has asked, what are some exciting projects that you're looking forward to in the next year, and what can we all look forward to? Can we know anything? Any secrets?
Oh, we've got so many. No, I'm kidding. I think, you know, look, we've got some really exciting new race projects on the go. So it's too early to kind of get into more detail on that, but we can't wait to share that news with you all as and when we get to it. I think longer term, we're obviously looking at where do we not race now that we would love to be. Africa is a key market that we just have to race in.
About that, we did have a question.
Did we? Okay, so for me, it's working on those projects and really seeing how we can, you know, globally grow Formula One and reach more fans, because that's the most important thing.
And so does that mean your team of 5 will be growing, and therefore there might be some opportunities for some of the people watching this evening?
Longer term, that is the goal. Obviously, in a COVID world, it's hard to sadly, it's hard to have the ability as a business to recruit to the extent we would like. But longer term, yes, I think it's always something that I would say, you know, keep watching this space. In terms of Formula One, we're a growth business. We have big ambitions to continue that growth pattern. And ultimately, to achieve that, you need to constantly be reviewing, you know, your staffing needs. So we'd hope to be able to do that, and alongside it, obviously, the internship scheme that we've got rolling out.
Definitely. Hopefully that answers Lorena's 2 questions. Goodness me, we've had so many questions, and I can't believe we're coming towards the end of the webinar this evening. We've had a question in about the hospitality side. Do you liaise with Paddock Club, F1 Experience, other areas of the circuit? How much does race promotion kind of get involved with that side? Or is it purely you guys are sort of contractual and delivering that? Or are you on the experiential side too? And that's in from LA Wilshaw, who of course is one of our hosts for the webinars?
No, well, we work really, really closely with the Paddock Club team, because obviously when we're looking to race in a new location, we have to ensure, or even in an existing location, ensure that there's enough space, and operational requirements for the Paddock Club mean that we do get quite involved in that. And obviously from a Paddock Club sales point of view, promoters are one of the key sales channels to their local market. So we spend quite a lot of time with our Paddock Club team making sure that they are price listing and sending our promoter the right information for them to be able to sell that to their clients. And obviously in terms of F1 experiences, we work with them, introducing them to each of our promoters to create different fan experiences. So they work, we don't get involved in the technicality of it, but we do all of the introductions and make sure we know the product. And then our promoters obviously operate their own hospitality. And again, we work with them to ensure that it's, a product offering that we're all comfortable with, the pricing, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a collaborative effort, but obviously we're not running the show on that side, but we're very heavily involved.
Something that's really changed since I've been involved with Formula One sort of directly are the fan zones. And Sans has asked, how did the fan zones come about? Are they something that your department manage or another department? Because on top of the Paddock Club and F1 experiences, there's fan zones and they are amazing. So do you guys, when you're looking at a new race, do you ensure that there's a footprint where there can be a fan zone? And how do you kind of make sure that there's enough space for all the fans that are going to come?
Oh, and Chloe, do you want
that?
Okay, so while Emily deals with the cat, but yes, Rosanna, we absolutely, it's a key part of working with the promoter through the kind of, deal negotiation phase to making sure we've got that space, that inventory, not just for Formula One fan zone, but also for activation rights for our key partners as well. And also working with the promoter on really then on a more kind of annual basis and throughout the year as we build up to the event itself to really showcase that area and figure it out, because sometimes also the promoter might want to adapt or change the layout of the circuit, maybe add a new grandstand here, build a new hospitality area, which may create different fan areas or fan zoning. So we're looking across that as a whole. We have an event delivery part of our team who we work with closely, who will be dealing with the promoter on that day to day alongside our events team. And then Emily is involved as a key part in working out some of the wider commercial arrangements around that.
Yeah, no, I think the other thing is that each circuit obviously has its own identity, its own layout, its own needs. And so, in some areas or some circuits, they zone their tickets. So people can't go from, around the entire track. So it means that we obviously bring our central kind of F1 fan zone, but the promoter's typically responsible for all of the food and beverage. And that's something that's really important from the fan experience point of view. So we have to make sure that there's enough of it to go round. Obviously a lot of fans have a similar experience. We don't, just because you're not in the main grandstand, you still want them to be able to access certain things. And there's the kind of basic needs of toilets, but then there's also the activities and experiential side. A Grand Prix weekend is much longer than a typical football match or anything, so you want to keep people occupied so that they stay on site for as many hours as possible. And it's quite a long day if you're there. You want to make sure that you've got enough to do whilst the racing isn't on track.
Definitely. I want to see Formula One cars, go in a single, eat a burger, go to the loo. There's a lot that I need to be doing while
exactly.
I'm on track.
And obviously you don't want to queue up the whole time either. So you need to make sure there's enough of it.
Absolutely. You mentioned football matches. Well, Sans has asked a question saying, do you get inspired by other organisations and the way they plan events? So Formula One is not typical. There aren't many other sports you can look to that is this sort of travelling global circus. Are there any sports that you do look at and think, actually, we can poach that idea, we can slightly tweak that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to the localization side, because what might work in Austin might not work in Singapore or Asia or what have you. So again, we lean very heavily on the promoters to ensure that they're kind of keeping an event at a standard, and Chloe's point around our event delivery team, obviously work with them hand in hand to ensure that happens. In terms of benchmarking, I think obviously you kind of look at those key major events around the Super Bowl, what the Olympics are doing. Again, there's kind of the fan experience side and what they're delivering, and then there's also who they're targeting as global partners, who's kind of new in the market, what they're doing around that. So I think it depends on what department you're in at F1, but I think you should always be monitoring what other sports are doing. But obviously, every Grand Prix weekend is an FA Cup final or a Champions League final. It's not like a league game, if that makes sense. So if you look at it as that final, then you want to see the fireworks and you want to see that kind of incredible experience that you might not get going to Chelsea on a Saturday.
I would just add to that I think it's important to take inspiration from other industries. So what are other live events doing, whether that's kind of music, theatre, arts? It's all around the experiential experience, immersive factor. We want to be as creative as possible in that fan experience while still making sure we're really, getting across the heart and the excitement and the passion of Formula One. But that's why I think as a sport we're so interesting, because we do have that crossover with kind of broader entertainment offerings.
Does that mean you both are live event junkies? When you are back from an F1 race, are you going to Glastonbury? Are you going to football matches?
I wish. There's not quite. We have so many F1 events. There's never enough time, Rosanna. But yeah, virtually in my head, I am.
Exactly. You're watching back all the highlights.
Yeah, sadly. But yeah, if there's opportunities to go there live, then we will go to as many as possible.
Exactly. And finally, the races go on at a certain time in a certain year, but are you having constant chats and conversations with, I don't know, so here we are in February in Singapore, going to be in September. Are you already on the phone, on the emails to Singapore, constantly checking in, or do you sort of say, right, we only talk to you from beginning of August or something?
No way. It's brilliant. It's year round. We have ultimately I think it's really important in life to remember that, we're all humans. It's all, we work on a relationship basis as much as we're in a kind of data-driven corporate sport, environment. People want to deal with people, and you get the more interaction you have, I think, the more you can achieve together, because you get that understanding of their objectives, where they're coming from, and equally they can understand yours. So I just couldn't, I guess, reinforce enough to everyone here your ability to build relationships, whatever industry or job you end up working with. It's just so key to doing business effectively. And so, yes, as part of that, and we enjoy it, WhatsApp's a wonderful thing. It means it's so easy to remain in contact constantly. And, we've worked with some of these people for a very long time. So you build some really strong relationships, and you really enjoy speaking to your clients. Emily, I don't know if you'd want to add.
No, again, it just comes back to, making sure you've got all the right apps. So we use WeChat for our Chinese promoter, and we're constantly talking to them because that's just their way of communication. Then obviously WhatsApp in some instances, but email, phone calls. The relationship managers in the team do a really good job of making sure that they have almost weekly phone calls to stay in touch with each of their allocated promoters. And then obviously the ones that we're working on, which is basically all of them all the time, all of these different initiatives and stuff, you're just naturally talking to them. And I've been I think this is my fourth season in F1, which it goes so unbelievably quickly that you don't really think about the gap of time. We're just constantly kind of talking to people, and by the time it gets to Singapore, you've been talking to them all year because of how quickly time goes.
Absolutely. Good question from Eve there. That was her question. Yeah, I can imagine the fireworks have only just finished banging at some of the tracks, and you're already talking about the next year and tying up things for the next year's contract. So yeah, very, very interesting. I cannot believe it has been an hour talking to you wonderful women. So many questions, and thank you so much to everyone for asking such intellectual, such brilliant questions, such probing questions. I hope we've covered a sort of range of the questions and the topics. But of course, you can watch this back because, as I said at the beginning, we are recording it. So keep an eye on Girls on Track UK's social media, because the videos will be going up, not just this one, but a lot of the webinars, or all of the webinars that have taken place across the month of February. So if you think, oh, I missed that, I'd love to watch that back and hear the answers from Chloe and Emily, then please do. And I'm sure if you've got questions for them, there will be a way that Girls on Track UK could get back to you from all the questions that we've seen this evening. Chloe and Emily, what a pleasure, especially as I know, and as you've already told us, you guys are so busy all the time. I'd hate to think how many emails, messages and WhatsApps have come in over the past hour, given that we are in sort of the 11th hour coming towards the start of another Formula One season.
Yeah, it's pretty busy, but at the same time, I just want to thank everyone so much for joining. I mean, it's such a pleasure to hear your questions and hopefully give you some guidance as to what you might find interesting in terms of finding your own career path. So I just want to wish everyone here really good luck. And obviously, you know, we hope that if this has helped, and we're here to help. And we really want to encourage more women to come and work in Formula One. It's a brilliant work environment, incredibly interesting, and you can build a really interesting career in many different sectors.
Definitely. And Emily, I'm sure you probably echo
that, but no, thank you for having us. And if anybody wants to reach out, I'm obviously more than happy to help.
Perfect. And we will send out a little survey just for your feedback. Of course, only one more webinar to come in this amazing series of An Evening with the Women of Formula One. You can, of course, sign up to the FIA Girls on Track UK community page on Facebook, follow and like Formula One, FIA Girls on Track UK, Motorsport UK, and all the links will be in the chat very shortly, or if they're not already there, because we've got such wonderful people working behind the scenes making sure this all happens. My thanks again to F1, to FIA Girls on Track UK, and of course this is all managed by Motorsport UK. My thanks of course to Chloe and Emily. Thank you so much for giving us a glimpse into the race promotions team, and thank you to all of you for your questions. I have loved spending the last hour with you, and I enjoyed the first webinar I did as well. That brings it to a close. Thank you so much everybody. Enjoy tomorrow's webinar and enjoy the 2021 season when it happens, and we've got Chloe, Emily and their team to thank for it, as we did the 2020 season as well. Thank you so much everybody.